everybody, welcome to A Very Miserable Evolution. It's that time again where we're looking at the it's the Tiger Avon rebuild with Chris Hollier. So just say a quick hello, Chris. I've got a couple of questions for you before we go on to what's coming up this week. But yeah, just introduce yourself, Chris, to tell us briefly about your Tiger Avon kit, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, hi John. I've had another busy week in the workshop on the Tiger. Lost a few days last week. Had to go to a family wedding. Spent 3 days in Wiltshire where I'd rather have been in the workshop. But never mind. I've spent the last couple of days catching up. Done plenty of progress. Tried to concentrate on doing all the things chassis modification wise to make me fit before I start. Then fitting the body will be the next phase.
Right, you're cracking on then. We had a very interesting question from the last link that we did, and it was from a user R. He didn't give his name, which is fine. I'm not sure whether that's come from YouTube or through Facebook, but he did ask a question, and he said a great video, and we'll put a link to their previous ones in the descriptions. But he said, but can you give me advice, or anybody, any advice on how to spot an unfinished project that is worth resurrecting? And I think it's a good question, but there's so many variables out there. So I don't know if you just want to touch base on that and why your Avon, well, as you said in one of the first videos, your Avon was a bit of a steal, wasn't it?
Yeah. Really, with all these kits, there's plenty of unfinished kit cars out there. They've been around for years. Some people have bought good kits and had not the right equipment or the right abilities to build them. Some people have bought dreadful kits, and no matter how good you are, you're never going to get it finished. So if you're buying somebody else's unfinished, what you've got to ask yourself is, first of all, do I really love it enough to put this huge amount of effort into this car, or am I only looking at it to try and make some money out of it? If you're doing it to try and make if you're doing it to try and make money, don't bother. You're not going to. You know, if you want to make a small fortune building kit cars, start with a big fortune. Because you're not going to make money doing it. But some of the kit cars that are out there that have been abandoned, especially the ones that are based on classic Ford mechanicals, old Ford Escort, Cortina stuff. The classic Ford market at the moment is doing very much better than the kit car market. So if you think it's got an awful lot of bits in it, it's worth money, then you can sometimes break a kit car. 1600 crossflow Ford engines now will fetch £1,000 all day long. Type 9 5-speed gearboxes will make £500. It's a shame. It really is a shame to break a kit car up just for the parts. But sometimes it's the only logical way forward. It
is an absolute shame to break a kit car, but the money's there, and certainly, I mean, ours is all Sierra. But when you start trying to look for Sierra bits like Sierra rear discs, they're £400 or £500 these days, and going through the roof, and harder to source. So I think you absolutely do need to think carefully about what you've got and what all the parts are worth. And as you say, the other thing is, have you got the skills to get it where it needs to be? So if the chassis needs a lot of work on it, repairing, have you got the welding skills? You're lucky because you've got a proper workshop and everything. Some people have just got a box of spanners. So it just depends on your own capabilities, I think, as well. And wiring, don't ask me about that.
There's some good solutions for wiring. I'm going to go back a stage from there, though, John. When you're looking at something like this, the reasons for building it are: one, you really love the car. Two, you think you can resurrect something that's very rare, and it might just cover its costs. It's going to be marginal at best, but you might. And the third one is you wanted the challenge for yourself. Now, depending on where you are in the world, if you're in the UK, we've obviously got IVA test. If you're in the States, their registration process in some states is a lot easier. In Australia, it's pretty similar to what we've got in the UK. If you're in mainland Europe, it's very difficult to register anything as a one-off, as a special.
Especially France, unless it's, I think it's 30 years old. But then you need, if it's a new one, you need certificates of conformity. I know a couple of the kit car manufacturers are looking at that and trying to get it so they can get them registered, but very, very difficult in France. And I think it's the same in Portugal. Is it Portugal or Spain? I'm thinking of where
you need proof of every component, where it came from. You need receipts for it, and it's got to be a watertight case. So I would really say if you're in one of those other countries, do your research before you even think about buying the project, because you could catch a serious cold on it.
Absolutely. I know someone out there, it's either Spain or I think it's Spain or Portugal, and he bought a Pilgrim Sumo with a 2-litre engine in it, and the rear diff, he needed a rear diff. Well, because of the way the registration works out there, if you change any little bit of that car, you can't get it registered. So he had to go back, and I think it was the Granada rear diff or whatever. He had to go and then source an original, I think it's Granada, or whatever the rear diff is. He had to source another rear diff that was exactly the same, or exactly the same model. And he ended up driving all the way back to England, because that's the only place he could find one. But yeah, if it had changed that, it would have changed the whole classification of the car, and it would not be road legal. So, I mean, for the UK, the IVA test, a lot of these early kit cars weren't even designed for SVA. Never mind about IVA. So if you do buy a real early one, just make sure you can get it through IVA.
You'll find one of the most prolific unfinished kits that will come up are Robin Hoods. They seem to be plenty, always for sale. There's loads and loads of them. And people think, well, okay, it's a 7-star car. It's got the suspension, it's on its wheels, it's got an engine and gearbox in it. But as you just mentioned, they weren't designed with IVA in mind. So to change what you have, unless you have full workshop facilities, into an IVA compliant vehicle is hard work, and it will cost you a lot of money. And you've got to remember that a fully built, really nice Robin Hood in roadworthy running condition with the correct paperwork is probably worth £5,000, £6,000, maybe £7,000.
Yeah.
You're going to be putting £3,000 or £4,000, £5,000 into it in a very basic level to get it up and ready for the road. So unless someone's prepared to give you this pile of parts for less than £500, it's just not financially viable.
Not financially. I mean, don't get me wrong. You can still get early cars through the IVA, but it's how much money do you want to throw at it? I mean,
it's all dependent on your skill level. That's the the balance. Where's your skill? Where's your budget? And where do you want to end up? And those three have got to come into some kind of balance somewhere.
Exactly. I mean, completely unrelated. My son, I bought him an RS125 motorbike, and it was a Valentino replica, very, very rare, 1999, full power, and the big ends went on it. So it's going to need a total engine rebuild. And when I looked at it, I could do bits of it, but I couldn't do all of it. There's a lot wrong with it. I need a lot of machining on the crankcases. The crank was out of true by about 2 thou, I think. The piston wasn't even aligned or shimmed. None of it was shimmed correctly, so everything was out of line. So it needed an absolute complete rebuild. And we took the view that it was a classic bike. There's only, I think, about 14 left in the UK, but we knew it was going to cost us more money to get it repaired and back on the road than it was actually worth. But we took the view that it is a classic bike. We did it. There's no way we're going to make any money on it. We're never going to get our money back. But at the end of, I don't like the saying at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, we did manage to put this classic bike back on the road, and there aren't many of them. So it depends what you want. Yeah, you're right. You're not going to make any money out of these cars.
Yeah, exactly. So if you love it enough and you want to do it for the right reasons because you really want to end up with a car, then it becomes, as all hobbies cost money. So therefore, they're not necessarily going to earn you a profit. But if you're not in it for too much damage, and you can come out with a car that you really love at the end of it, then it's worth it. But do your homework. Above all else, do the homework. You've got to check the invoices, the registration document. If somebody says it's got the donor vehicle registration document on a Robin Hood, it's worth nothing, because it's not a Ford Sierra anymore. And a lot of people will, either through ignorance or through fraudulent behaviour, will try and convince you that that's all you need. And you can wander down to the DVLA and they give you a logbook.
the giveaway on some of these cars when they come up for sale. If you see a Q plate, so it starts with a Q, it's probably gone through SVA or even IVA to get a Q plate. If you see a car for sale that's very cheap that does not start with a Q, that is when alarm bells should start ringing. Not necessarily because it's incorrectly registered, because it might not be. Ours has got a private plate on, for instance, but you absolutely need to check on the V5 that someone's just not filled it all in and they've just put the original donor registration plate on the car, because the MOT stations are picking up on that as well, and they will refuse to MOT them. So you're absolutely right. Check whatever paperwork that you've got. No, I was going to say, you're going to say it's a worthwhile project. It's a labour of love, and if that's your thing, brilliant. And you get the pride, when you first drive it on the road and get it all registered. It's a car you've built, and you get that total satisfaction. But you're not going to make money on it. No. Not unless you get it stupidly cheap.
When I got the Tiger Avon, I knew that it was an extremely good price, and the value of the parts that are in it about 6 or 7 times the value that I paid for the whole car. So it's worthwhile building, and even if I did want to bail out at some point, I can get the value back out of it without too much effort if for whatever reason I couldn't finish it.
So I hope that answers your question, Mr. R. If you're watching this, if it doesn't, drop us another note and we'll get back to you again on the next one. Okay. So what have you been doing this week, Chris? I know you've only just come out of the garage, haven't you? And you've got yourself a glass of beer. And it's Sunday afternoon, and while everybody else has been sitting watching the football all day or whatever they care to do on a Sunday, I've been out there. Once I get the enthusiasm for a build, I just want to get on with it. Any waking hours are just okay, let's go and do some more. So this week and some of last week were all about trying to do all the things to the chassis that were essential before the body went on. Rebuilding suspension you can do with the body on, but things like moving pedal boxes, shifting handbrakes, making gear changes are much easier with no bodywork in the way, because you're grinding, you're welding, you don't really want to be close to the gel coat. So it's all been about trying to get all the fabrication and modification work done. I can now sit comfortably in the car, operate the pedals, operate the steering. I don't bash my elbows on anything, and I've moved everything around to where it needs to be. The last bit of fabrication I've got to do is the radiator mounting. Everything else is now ready to go. This one should show us what we needed to do nuts and bolts wise, and then the following episode next time we should be looking at fitting the body on. Brilliant, because I know you'll come on to it as well about you've already said you're a larger chap, you're taller than normal, but how have you managed to fit yourself in the car? Well, I know we'll come on to that in later videos, but be interested to see. So great talking to you again, Chris, and I can't wait to see these new videos because I've not seen them yet. So I'll have a look at them later on when this goes out.
You've got a surprise coming. This is all of this. There's quite a few little tricks and tips in here about why I've done stuff. As I said right at the beginning of this process, I'm not trying to turn it into a build video. That's been done a dozen times, so that's not really interesting. This is the reasoning behind how I'm making some of the stuff and where I'm going with it as far as we know what its end use wants to be. Let's now develop the car so that it meets the end use requirements as closely as we physically can.
Exactly. You won't be necessarily going for IVA straight off. You may do. It's built with IVA in mind, but you've also thought it through that you're going to go with a stock engine at the moment, but you're also thinking that in the future you might need to do upgrades, and you'll cover them all off if you want to get a little bit more power. But you don't need huge power in these sevens.
No, I think a lot of people have lost sight of what a nice, torquey, fairly standard car engine in a lightweight car feels like, because we've been trading on top trumps numbers for the last 10 years about you've got to have all this and all that. And I want to bring it back down to basic levels and say to people, right, you can build a budget car. It will go fast. It may not have the 400 horsepower top trumps winning down the pub numbers, but I bet it'll keep you excited when you're driving it out on the road or on a track day or on a hill climb, and it will be pretty effective. Once you get used to driving the car and you know how it handles, how to learning road racecraft effectively.
Yeah.
Once you've got that bit right, then you start upping the power levels. Then it starts to make sense.
Absolutely, because most people, it's a generalization. Most people, unless you own a Merc or a BMW, will only have driven front-wheel drive cars. Driving a rear-wheel drive car is completely different. Oversteer, understeer. The back end will come out if you provoke it enough. The back end will come out. You won't get that. You won't get that on a front wheel drive car. But you're absolutely right. You need to get used to these things before you even think about planting the throttle. But brilliant, Chris.
You've got no traction. You've got no traction control. You've got no ABS. You've got no power steering. You've got no servo. So you really do have to learn how to drive one of these cars effectively. And if you can do that, that's when the excitement comes in. And you can, if you've done it well, then you can take credit for it, not the guy who designed the traction control system in the BMW plant over in Munich.
Yeah, exactly. Right, Chris, always great talking to you again. I can't wait to see what you've been up to this week. So yeah, we'll roll the videos after this, and I'll have a look a bit later when it's edited down. Cheers, Chris.
Okay, I'll catch up with you again soon, John. Hopefully in a couple of weeks. Another big step forward again.